Welcome to Level with Emily Reese. This conversation features composer Jose Varon, who has done the music for Imp of the Sun. Imp of the Sun made by a company that Jose started during the pandemic called Sunwolf Entertainment. So we're going to talk about Imp of the Sun, its influence based off of Peruvian culture, which is where the development team and Jose are from and live. So the music and the art is, oh my God, it's such a gorgeous game. It's a 2D platformer. It starts off kind of like Breath of the Wild or Elden Ring in that you can go wherever you want, more or less, when you start. And so the gameplay is different each time you play through it, depending on which direction you choose to go from the start. So it's a neat game, and the music is fantastic. Jose used a lot of instruments from Peru, some of which were 6,000 years old that he recorded in a museum. So that was really cool to talk about, but also various types of instruments that are still played there and elsewhere in the world, like pan flutes, an instrument called the quena, which is also a flute, and the quena flute represents the main character in the game, so you hear that flute a lot. Also wooden trumpets, various percussion, all kinds of really cool instruments from that area, the Andes Mountains, some from pre-Incan cultures. I mean, just really cool stuff in the game Imp of the Sun. All right, now if you want to hear that music, you won't hear that here in this YouTube version, so you need to go listen to the audio version of the podcast, which is what we intend, and then you'll get to hear nice, lovely samples of all kinds of things that he's talking about that he uses in Imp of the Sun. So if you want to hear that, just go wherever you get your podcasts, you'll find it. Join us on Discord to talk about this and other games, game music, all kinds of fun things we like to talk about on Discord. You can find a link to our Discord server in the show notes. Please become a patron if you're able. We could absolutely 100% use your support. If that is within your means, please give generously. No, but just please support us if you're able to. Patreon.com/level is where you can do that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That helps, of course, as well. So let's see. What else do I want to say to you? Patron Perks, maybe that'll give you some incentive to become a patron. Patrons often know ahead of time who I'm interviewing. I take recommendations from patrons that I oftentimes will follow through on, if appropriate for the show and whatnot, or if I hear back. So there are a lot of cool things that patrons have access to, including you're thanked in the credits. So that's pretty neat too. And we're very grateful for all of our patron support. All right, back to Jose. So as he's going to explain, he started Sunwolf Entertainment along with a friend during the pandemic, and they made this amazing game. It's incredible. They did it all so fast too, and it's really been a treat to experience the game and to hear his absolutely wonderful music. So in any event, here is Jose.
Imp of the Sun is the first game we did at Sunwolf Entertainment. Sunwolf is a relatively new company that I started right during the pandemic. And our first game is called Imp of the Sun. And it's a small game inspired by Peruvian culture, which is the culture of the team developing it. And yeah, we produced the game in 10 months, then packaging it and like doing ports to the different consoles took 8 more months, and then we launched the game like 2 months ago, and we're super excited.
Yeah, I mean, that seems so fast, but that's probably a whole other issue. Will you describe the game a little bit? It's so beautiful and colorful and 2D platformer kind of situation, but talk a little bit more about the game itself, if you would.
Yeah, so Imp of the Sun, it's a game inspired by Peruvian culture. We wanted to have something. We wanted to avoid the risk of Bangerter technologies, which is why we went for a 2D platformer. We wanted an element that would differentiate the game from the crowded genre, which is why we decided to go for a Peruvian-inspired mythology. And we also wanted something that represented the culture of the people doing it, which is why we chose that. And it's a story about Nin, which is a little imp sent by the sun god to defeat the four keepers that stole his power.
And musically speaking, you have a lot of themes going on, melodic and rhythmic, which is really fun to kind of listen through and hear throughout the game. And if we talk about Nin, Nin has just a little 3-note flute theme, right? Will you talk about that?
Yes. So that's Nin's motif, and you hear it like every time Nin appears or does something, like especially like on the during the cinematics, and that was the first 3 notes that I wrote. They were like, okay, those stay, and then like the whole score was evolved from those 3 notes. And and then there are like a bunch of other different themes. For instance, the moon's theme is also 3 notes, and you hear it like right at the beginning as well of the overture. And it's the whole dance between those 2 set of 3 notes.
Imp's notes and the moon notes. Yeah. And talk about that flute. It's the quena, right?
Yes. So for Nin, we use a quena, and for Kila, which is the moon, we use a quena chincha. It's a variation of the quena, but more like it's made of clay, so it sounds kind of like an ocarina.
Yeah.
And so
yeah, it's a really beautiful sound, and you use it throughout the whole score, obviously, because it, represents Nin, but it's just a really gorgeous sound. So was that an instrument that you were, super familiar with as it being a Peruvian instrument, or is this something you kind of learned more about as you dug into these more ancient instruments?
Well, for the quena, yes, I had used it before, and the quena chincha, not so much, but that was one of the instruments that we actually recorded at a museum. So we had the opportunity to record a bunch of instruments in a museum, and those are actual 6,000-year-old instruments. So we recorded that one, and I had never heard of the quena because you hear of the quena chincha, because you hear of the quena, but not of the quena chincha. And I was like, hey, what's that? And so I was like, oh, this sounds amazing. It's like, okay, I need to use it one way or another. And that's exactly what we did.
That's incredible. What are some of the other ancient instruments that you were able to access and use for the score?
Oh, a lot of instruments. We recorded like 45 or 50 different instruments.
Oh, wow.
A lot of seashells, requiem trumpets, which are trumpets, wooden trumpets. Then a lot of different flutes, bone flutes, clay flutes, and one wooden flute, and then a lot of whistles, which I really, really love, because actually the one that was 6,000 years old was like a whistle, and it sounded super like haunting and beautiful.
And so how did you approach the museum about possibly recording these instruments? How did that happen?
Oh, one argument. That's all I had, which was like, you have 6,000-year-old instruments. You need to know how they sound. So I was like, let's play them once, and that's it. And they were like, well, yeah, I mean, you can't argue with that. Like, let's play them once, and then back to the museum.
Yeah. Now, did you play them yourself?
No. I hired like an actual wind player, okay. And yeah, it was interesting experience. It was very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, that's very cool. You mentioned wooden trumpets, and as a trumpet player, that conjures all kinds of interesting pictures in my head. But I'm curious if that's the instrument that sounds kind of like a didgeridoo a little bit. Is that one of those wooden trumpets? Okay, tell me more about those.
Yeah, those were exactly that. So like different trumpets, which different shaped trumpets, and the one you might be hearing that sounds like a didgeridoo, probably is that trumpet, but pitched down like 1 octave or two.
Oh, cool.
So I did play with them a little bit as well. Some of them just to make them fit whatever tonality I was using, and some of them for effect purposes.
Yes.
So what you're hearing in that section where you say like the didgeridoo on the overture, you're hearing a toyo, which is like the largest pan pipes, which are like huge, like super tall.
Yeah.
And so there are like those, a bass canacho pitched down, and the wooden trumpet pitched down.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I really loved that sound because, I knew it wasn't a didgeridoo, but it was something. Yeah, that was a really, really neat effect of that. And in the game itself, there are different biomes, right? And one of the cool things, I think, is when you start, you can go wherever you want, right? Just like Breath of the Wild, you can just go. And I think, it's neat that they're very obviously distinct areas. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and kind of coming up with a sound for each of these different spots?
Yeah, of course. So we wanted exactly that. We wanted them to be different, like completely different musically as well.
Yeah.
As well as the art itself, because the art was inspired by different regions of Peru, and the music as well. So there were like a few instruments were only used in each of the areas. So for instance, on the mountains was the only area where I used the scissors, which are the like scissors. They sound like a triangle, pretty much, like two metal sticks. And so those scissors, which are used in the music from Peru, which is a region in Peru. Then we had the panpipes there, and the roncadoras are a percussion instrument, kind of like a bass drum, but it's like a bass drum, but has like a snare. And so it sounds like a mix of those. And so the roncadoras and all the choirs were in Aymara, which is a language, again, from the region.
Okay.
Then on the desert, we had the cajones, with the Peruvian cajones, which don't have snare, as opposed to the Puerto Rican or the they don't have a snare. So it sounds like more woody kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so we recorded an ensemble of cajones and made them epic, which was an interesting experience. And that whole area also was inspired by a dance festejo, which is just like it's the Peruvian music.
Okay.
And yeah, so then and the choirs also had like different languages for each of the areas. So on the desert, they were singing in Quechua. In the jungle, they were singing in Ashaninka. And in the underworld, a mix of Aymara and Quechua.
Okay. Yeah, I loved all the choir work too. Is really beautiful, and one of my favorite examples of that was in a track called "Mountain Precipices," which has just all this beautiful choral writing along with just a host of strummed instruments. Right, so I'm not sure which, but yeah, that was a really neat track. Do you want to say more about that one?
Yeah, so that is like when you first get into the mountain. So it's a more beautiful setting than like musically as well than when you do the boss. So for that one, I used it was we had tijera, then charango and classical guitar. So those were the strings you were hearing.
Mm.
And again, the choirs were in Aymara, and the featured instrument there was the pan flute.
Okay. Yeah. Love all the pan flutes too. Oh my God. Yeah. So good. So, I have more questions about Imp of the Sun, of course, but I'd love to step away for just a minute and learn a little bit more about you and your musical background. So, what's your main instrument?
So my main instrument is guitar, even though I haven't played a bit. But my main instrument. I would say really my main instrument is a computer because that's what I use every day, all day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the one I went to school with. I studied at Berkeley in Boston, and then I moved to LA where I lived for about 2.5 years, and then moved back to Berkeley.
Okay. And, I guess when you were growing up, were you composing as a young boy, or did you not start that till you were older, or how did that come into your life?
Well, since when I applied to Berkeley and I saw like the different degrees and I saw film score and I was like, oh, is that actor? Can you do that? And then when I saw there was like a video game minor, I was like, can you do that? I just like, it was just something that I never thought about, but I was like, that's really what I want that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's since that moment I was like, all right, that's what I'm gonna do.
So you clearly were a gamer, or are a gamer, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when because this company you mentioned is new, and, what made you decide to start it? You said you started it during the pandemic. Was it that decision, or was it something that you had wanted to do for a long time?
It was really an opportunity, because when the pandemic started, I was like, I kept working normally because most of the gaming companies were like, okay, what are we gonna do? All right, it's fine, let's keep going. So it wasn't because of the pandemic, but I was talking with a friend who was part of an economic, and we were just like discussing. He told me, hey, what do you think about like this project? And I was like, I mean, it looks cool, but why don't you start a video game company? The game industry is like, it's going up right now, so it might be a good idea. And then, I mean, like, I didn't hear from him for about a month, and he was like, hey, do you want to do the company? And I'm like, sure. Let's do it. And I love business as much as I love music. So
wow, yeah.
Really, yeah, I do love business in general. So I have also a company, an audio company called The Audio Hive with Velasco, who's a composer. And so I had that experience running a company, which is why we talk about like, okay, you want to do this video game company? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. That's how it all started.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean that, and some of the folks from your audio company worked on Imp of the Sun, right?
Yes, we had a relatively big team for an indie game, which is we had 3 sound designers and me as a composer.
Okay.
So, with like 4 people on an indie game is not the normal. Like what you usually have is like one audio guy, and that's it. He does everything.
Yeah.
In this case, we had like designers doing design, one sound designer only implementation, and me writing the music and running the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So tell me a little bit more, if you would, about, the influence of Peru artistically. And, I think we've talked a bit musically, the influence, but, I know that it was beyond the music that influenced this game. So if you could tell me a little bit more about, maybe visually how this game was influenced by your country.
Yeah, of course. So it was really influenced by the different regions of Peru. So like exactly the same as we did with the music was what we did with the art. And really with everything. So the art was inspired, for instance, the art in the jungle was inspired by the culture of Chachapoyas, which is just a region in Peru. The underworld was inspired by a culture called Chavin, which has like these like, huge like stone heads and like stone monolith, and he did like human sacrifices, so it was perfect for the underworld. So that's, I mean, that's where it came from. Then the desert was inspired by the Señor Zipan, which is again, and the Mochica culture, which is again another culture. These are pre-Incan cultures, and
Okay, yeah.
so and then the mountains were influenced by the Incan culture and by Machu Picchu, especially.
Yeah.
So at the boss is like a mountain, and if you see like back, it's actually Machu Picchu.
That's incredible. Yeah. I mean, when, most people are familiar with Machu Picchu, but not these pre-Incan cultures. So that's, one of the things that's so, I guess, fulfilling about playing the game is learning about this whole other layer of Peruvian history that, certainly I'm not familiar with. So, how did you deal with, for instance, having all these other languages in? Like, who did you know who spoke these languages, or how did you find people who spoke such ancient languages?
Well, they're not ancient. Well, they're ancient languages, but people do speak them now.
They're still part of the culture.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. They're still part of the culture. So it wasn't super hard to find a translator.
Sure.
But like the real challenge was to make the works fit, because the translators were not musicians.
Oh,
and
sure. Yeah.
So that was the fun part, which was like just like trying some words and having them translate them. Okay, does it make sense? Does this work? And all that that back and forth with the translators was the challenge. So I didn't write the lyrics. That was my girlfriend, and she wrote the lyrics, and she was doing like the whole translation part.
Okay.
And it ended up pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that.
Yeah. And I like at the end too, where you bring piano in. What made you decide to have the piano so bare at the very end of the game?
I wanted to, I don't know, I wanted to have a more of like a Ghibli movie at the end, and so I was like, well, it should be a solo piano. So that's why I wanted to have the but play it on a piano.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and especially I love how the whole thing ends with Nin's theme. I just absolutely love that. What are some of the other live instruments that you use that maybe, might be kind of a surprise? Like, was there, I mean, this is a ridiculous example, but like harpsichord or something like that. Was there something that you threw in there that just really was the sound you needed, even if it didn't really quite, fit in, so to speak?
Well, there's one instrument which is not from the region, but again, it's not a documentary, so who cares?
Yeah.
Which was an Aztec death whistle.
Okay.
And we used that one for the underworld, which is like, it doesn't really fit the the underworld doesn't fit the cultural area from where the rest of the other world is inspired. But yeah, so that was one instrument that I really loved and was used, because it was an instrument that a friend brought to me from when he went to Mexico.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm gonna use it.
So this is the first game that your company, this new company, has done, but you've done other games before, and you've done other media before. So I guess, what do you find most enriching about working in video games?
Well, I think that they're all fun in different ways. But what I really love about video games is like the implementation of the music. Like doing like experimenting with how the implementation and like reorchestration and like branching techniques are going to change how the music sounds. I really like that part of it. So
Interesting.
which is like, I don't know, like something that probably most composers don't like because it's a different job, right? It's not a composer job.
Yeah.
But I do like to think ahead and go like, oh, what if we did this or that, or like how can we make this more interesting?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I really like about working on video games.
Yeah, and I think, implementation, if you are active in that as a composer, it obviously can change how you're thinking of your own music. So it's a valuable thing to enjoy doing because, as you say, some composers don't really like doing it, but it's such an informative, important process, right?
Yeah. So I didn't do the implementation myself, but I did do the concept, right? So it's like,
Yep.
okay, I want the music to do this and this and this and this and that. So that whole part for me is actually really fun.
Yeah, that's cool. And so what are some of the things that you're working on right now? If there are things you can talk about, what are you writing for right now?
Well, because I'm also CEO of some, if I can say this. So we're working on a new game.
Awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the perks of being CEO of a gaming company as well. So yeah, we're working on a new game, which is an RPG,
Nice.
and yeah, so I'm working on the music for that one.
Oh,
And
neat.
yeah, I can say much more, but
All right. No, that's awesome. I love that.
yeah.
And we might share a little obsession here. Did I read somewhere that you're playing Elden Ring right now, or have you finished it?
Already finished it.
You finished it?
Yeah.
Well done. Well, what are you playing right now?
Thank you. I'm very proud.
You should be. You should be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely love that game. It was incredible. Like I love Souls-like games. Actually,
Okay.
Imp of the Sun was inspired by Souls-like games, and at some point we really want to do something like that because it's just amazing how like the whole world and how like the freedom you have to explore, and but also like the difficulty. It's part of the charm of the game.
Yes.
Which is something that I didn't get at first because, like, when I started playing Souls like game, I was like, well, why does it have to be so difficult? But then you get it, and it's like, okay, I get it, why it has to be like this.
Yes.
So,
yeah, I was the same with. I tried Bloodborne. I tried Dark Souls. I don't think I ever played Demon Souls, but I played some Souls-likes, and they never really landed with me very well. And I think, Elden Ring was made for people like me, in a way, who kind of need to ease into understanding that difficulty, and I like being able to run away. In most cases, you can't always run away, but sometimes you can. And that, for me, made the difference. And so now I'm pretty sure I'll probably go back and play some of those older ones too. But man, that's crazy.
It was incredible. And also, like, my business partner, Chris, he loves the Gothic art. And I told him, like, dude, like, this game is made of all the art in your house. And it was like literally like that, those like Gothic environments, like weird creatures, like everything.
Wow.
And yeah, after playing it on, it's like, okay, now I appreciate more all your art.
So the RPG will be Nin going through Elden Ring environment. Is that
Not really. No, it's actually gonna be Peru themed. It's really like it's more themed out of like different of the world.
Cool.
But again, it's not like it's not a main feature. The fact that it's a theme of different cultures. It's just like a
yeah. There's one other track I want to make sure I mention because it gets stuck in my head and I love it. And also a lot of really very cool rhythmic stuff that you're doing in Imp of the Sun. And whether it's polyrhythms or whether it's just, irregular meters and fives, or I don't know if there's sevens, but I think there maybe are some fives in there. And that's just, it adds a really energetic feel to a lot of the music. But there's one track, Mountain Ruins. There's something about the mountain. I guess I'm the mountain region girl, but Mountain Ruins it's very folky, and I love the melody in that. Can you tell me a little bit about that piece?
Yes, of course. So that one is what you would imagine when you think of Peru. Like, that's the sound that you would imagine, right? You would imagine like the pan flutes,
yeah,
and the Andean guitar. So that one has like, it does have like a bunch of irregular meters. That's because of how I write.
Okay.
That I don't know, for some reason I don't do like melodies which are like 1 meter only. But I don't know, that's how I hear them.
Yeah.
Not on purpose. And so it's like 5/4 and then 4 and then something. And also the roncadoras have like a very particular pattern that they do, which is like, if you really analyze it, it's like a sixth of who knows what. Like a 128 that you move a little bit before, but that's the point. It's more like a cultural like feel of how you play it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you just have like that interesting pattern, and then the charangos and the guitars.
Yeah, I love all that. Love all the guitar-y type instruments with all the percussion. It's wonderful. And one where you really get to hear, I think it's the Kenna again, is Hub World, right? Right away in the beginning, you get to hear so much of that beautiful Kenna. So who did you had mentioned that you had an actual woodwind player. Is that pretty much the person who played all the Kenna parts? And how did that work?
No, actually, so everything we recorded in the museum was recorded more as a sampling.
Sure.
So that was before I wrote like any notes. So it were just like textures and like sounds, a few phrases to pick from, but mostly sounds and textures. Then I actually had like I always work with whose name is Sandro Friedrich, and he's in Switzerland. He's like great woodwind, and I had so we had a few kind of changes made here and then sent over to him, and so and then he also got a Toyo. He got a bunch of this, and of Peruvian instruments. He had kenas already, and he played all of those.
Yeah, it's just such lovely sound. I love it. What more do you want to say about Imp of the Sun, or anything else you've got up your sleeve?
What else do we have? I don't know. I think we talked a lot about it. Well, probably I didn't explain the concept of each of the areas clearly.
If you like, yeah.
Yeah. So for each of the areas, we had like the same concept, in the sense that we had one motif of the boss that was played. So each of the big areas was subdivided in 2 areas and then a boss fight. Okay. And so each of those areas had different style of music, and then the boss fight. So this same motif was evolving throughout the area. So you'd hear first, I don't know, for instance, in the desert, you hear the motif played on a cello, very like spaced out. Yeah. And then you hear it again, but more solemn when you get to the tempo. And then when you get to the final boss fight, you hear it as a kind of duel of fates, like a Peruvian duel of fates. So that's how you get it. But it's always the same motif that tells a story of the boss that you're fighting.
Interesting. Okay. And, you mentioned the Souls-like influence, and this comes through in the bosses, right? Because the bosses are pretty challenging.
Yes. Yeah, they're pretty challenging. but still we want to have enough, but still help the player a little bit, because in this case you cannot just like run away. And so I mean, you could do a different boss, you can, but there's like the world is not big enough that you can make it work like as a ring. So in this case, what we had was a little system in the program inside that helps you a little bit if you're dying too many times. But still, like it's a little bit challenging at first. Once you get understand it, it's actually not that challenging. But then for those who really seek for a challenge, we have Eclipse mode, which is super hard.
Yeah, and now since you can go wherever you want at the beginning of the game, you potentially can have very different playthroughs as you play through the game, right? Because if you go to one area, you unlock certain things different from a different area, correct?
Yes, exactly. And the whole world is designed for that, because the replayability feels different if you have different abilities on different points. Yeah. And there's also like different shortcuts that you can take, and items you can collect. So it's a difference every time. And it's also a different experience when you have like all of them, which is why we created this mode.
Nice. I love that. So, back to what you're playing. What are you playing right now?
Right now, not much. Since I finished reading, I was like, okay, this game has consumed like enough of my life already. Well, no, it had been a long time since I had played like a game that I like so much as Elden Ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the highlight of this year, really.
I still have a ways to go. I still haven't even unlocked the mountains, the cold weather region. I haven't unlocked that yet. So I've got some play ahead of me yet, but yeah. Working my way through some of the underground stuff right now, which is really, I mean, that game's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, man, and I really look forward to seeing Sunwolf Entertainment's next game, and I'm just so amazed with your the time that it took you to make Imp of the Sun and to get it out into the world. That's remarkable. So I'm excited to see what's coming next from you guys. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, it really was such a pleasure to hear your music, and obviously to learn more about Peru. What a treat. And just thank you for your time today and for writing such wonderful music.
Yeah, so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.